Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the angiotensin-aldosterone hormonal system of regulating blood pressure. So, even though the main thing that this is going to do for us is it's going to bring our blood pressure up, this whole system is also going to be activated when sodium is too low in the blood plasma or potassium is too high. Those two things are generally going to go hand in hand. But the main impetus here is going to be that your blood pressure is too low. Okay, let's start at the beginning here. There is a protein that is always produced by your liver, and this protein is called angiotensinogen. This angiotensinogen is basically useless. It's not going to do anything, which is why I have a label calling it inactive right here. Angiotensinogen is useless unless an enzyme that is produced by your kidneys called renin converts it into something that is useful, which is angiotensin-1. So if angiotensinogen is useless, how do we regulate the production of this enzyme that actually makes it useful? So renin is only going to be produced by the juxtaglomerular apparatus of your kidneys in situations in which sodium is low, potassium is high, or if the blood pressure is just too low. So as long as your blood pressure is normal and the concentrations of these two electrolytes are normal as well, renin will not be produced. It will be inhibited by cells of the macula densa in the kidneys, and angiotensinogen will just remain useless. But let's say that blood pressure is too low or these two electrolytes are out of balance. Renin will be produced. Angiotensinogen, which is just circulating throughout the blood plasma, will be converted to angiotensin-1. Okay, angiotensin-1 is still not quite what we want. I wouldn't call it useless, but it's still not quite what we want. Angiotensin-1 is going to continue to circulate throughout the circulatory system until it gets into the capillaries of the lungs. At that point, another enzyme called angiotensin-converting enzyme, which is produced by the cells in the lungs, will then convert angiotensin-1 into angiotensin-2. This is going to be our moneymaker here. This is going to be the protein that is going to start getting things done for us. So angiotensin-2 is going to do several things for us here. Angiotensin-2 is going to have its own independent effects on the blood pressure by stimulating the vasoconstriction of arterioles. And as we've seen before, this is going to have the effect of increasing the blood pressure by increasing the total peripheral resistance. Okay, but that's not all angiotensin-2 is going to do for us. Angiotensin-2 is also going to act on cells of the adrenal cortex to stimulate aldosterone production. So aldosterone, a steroid hormone, will then make its way to the cells of the cortical collecting duct in the nephron, and this is going to stimulate sodium reabsorption and potassium secretion, which are two things that make perfect sense if you consider the fact that the things that got this whole mess started is that sodium is too low and potassium is too high. So therefore we want to reabsorb as much sodium as possible, get rid of as much potassium as possible. So in the process of reabsorbing sodium and secreting potassium, this is going to increase the total blood volume, and just as the case was with total peripheral resistance, when you increase the total blood volume, you increase the blood pressure. So obviously this is going to work much like a regular homeostatic mechanism with full negative feedback. Once the blood pressure comes back to normal, once the levels of sodium and potassium go back to normal, this whole thing should shut off because renin will no longer be secreted, angiotensinogen will no longer be converted to angiotensin-1, the whole thing will shut itself off and we'll be good. The last thing I want to say, just because this is such a good way to bring this up as a means of clinical relevance, is let's talk one more time about this angiotensin converting enzyme. So this angiotensin converting enzyme takes on the acronym ACE, ACE. For those of you that maybe have done some research or are familiar with these types of drugs on your own, this is going to remind you of an ACE inhibitor, and that's exactly what an ACE inhibitor is. An ACE inhibitor is an antagonistic drug that inhibits the activity of this ACE enzyme, meaning that if you're taking an ACE inhibitor, your body will be unable to convert angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. So no more angiotensin 2 if you're taking an ACE inhibitor. So what I want you to be able to do on your own, and you're going to want to think about this a little bit, I want you to be able to tell me why someone would want to take an ACE inhibitor. So think about the fact that if you're taking an ACE inhibitor, you're no longer going to have any angiotensin 2. Think about what it is that angiotensin 2 does down here, and think about why it is that someone might want to take an ACE inhibitor. So that's going to be something I want you to think about on your own. We'll talk a little bit about it in class, whether you're coming tomorrow, my Monday, Wednesday section, or on Tuesday for my Tuesday, Thursday section. We'll talk a little bit about it then, but for now, that's just something I want you to start thinking about.